Okay, thanks a lot, Martin. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's a new experience for me. It's the first time I do this. I hope everything will go well, I'm sure. So I wanted to do some kind of overview of optimal transport from a computational perspective, and also highlight some recent work that we have been doing, which are about trying to scale optimal transport to high dimension, both in terms of computation time and also in terms of statistical performance. It's a joint work with a lot of people, in particular, of course, with Marco Cuturi, who is my main collaborator on these lines of ideas. And it's also, in large part, the PhD work of Aude Genvet, at least for the machine learning part. All right, before starting, just some shameless advertisement for this book. So feel free to go online to retrieve the PDF. It will detail everything that I would say today and much more. And it's totally free and open source. And you also have Python code to go with it. All right, so first a bit of motivation. Why optimal transport? First, actually, why trying to model problems with probability distribution, histograms, and so on. I think it's fairly obvious that in most imaging processing field, there is some opportunity for using this type of models. You can think about modeling the colors or modeling feature of image, also for shapes or neuroscience. I think it really makes sense to try to manipulate some kind of a density of points or density of electric activity, for instance, in the brain. And I would say more recently in high dimensional setup, both supervised learning and unsupervised learning, there is an interest in trying to introduce some tools to manipulate densities. For instance, in natural language processing, there is like a breakthrough the last few years, I would say, that tries to model the data sets of text using word embedding. So you see the text as a point cloud in a very high dimensional space for doing supervised learning, for instance. And also for instance, generative models of images. There is this idea also trying to manipulate the image, I think, as a big point cloud in very high dimensional space. Okay, so in all these type of problems, the key question you're asking is to try to fit some prior model, some parametric model, let's call it alpha, depending on some parameter theta, to a huge point clouds. So it's a basic problem in image processing, shape matching, generative models, where you try to model the data using deep nets. And really the goal is to try to fit the model, to try to make the model as close as possible to the point cloud. So you can frame this question as trying to minimize some kind of discrepancy, capital D, between your model and your data. It's pretty obvious, and I would say many problems can be framed like this. And the key question here is, what should be the capital D that you want to use to address this efficiently? And in all this type of setups that you've seen before, there is some notion of underlying metric, because the data don't live in an abstract space. It could be the Euclidean distance between colors, could be some kind of geodesic distance, could be a word embedding, or could be for generative models, some kind of adversarial network that you will train to obtain some meaningful metric. And the goal of optimal transport is quite simple, is to be able to lift this small d distance between pairs of points to this capital D distance between group of points or density more generally. So really, the key, I would say, take-home message of this talk is optimal transport is some kind of automatic mathematical method that does this lift for you without even having to think about this. So it's kind of cool. It benefits from a very strong mathematical theory, but of course it comes with a huge price. Okay, so the question also I want to address is, how do you do this in practice? All right, so this is kind of the question we'd like to address. First of all, let's try to frame this a little bit more precise with equation, and I will mainly describe things with point clouds, but you can think of arbitrary distribution. So you have a distribution of red points that are equipped with some masses. So xi are the points, and ai is an histogram, so it's positive weights that should sums to 1. And you want to transfer these red points toward the blue points. It's a pretty obvious question. And optimal transport try to do this in a kind of an optimal way with minimizing the transport cost. And the first, so it's a very old problem that was framed by Gaspard Monge more than 2 centuries ago, but the true revolution comes during the World War II with Leonid Kantorovich, which introduces a key concept, which says that I want to describe this movement of mass in kind of a general way by introducing the notion of couplings. So sometimes it's also called the transport plan. In discrete, it's just a big matrix, capital P. Okay, so you can think of this as an array of n times n number, where n and m are the number of points. And each time you have a non-zero element in this array, a purple dot here, it means you want to transfer some mass. Okay, so if you look at the first line of this matrix, you see that you have a first non-zero elements, which means that the first point in the first histogram would be transferred to the first point in the blue histogram. Kind of what would be called a monge or a deterministic send of mass from the first point toward the second point. But what is very interesting is actually, if you look at the second line, you see that you have two non-zero elements, which means that actually here, the mass will be split into two parts. And really the revolution of Kantorovich, and he got the Nobel Prize in economy for this, is just this. Is the idea that sometimes it's better to be able to split the mass in two. It's very simple, but it's very powerful. Okay, and then what is this set of capital P that you are looking for to describe the movement of mass? It's a fairly simple object because it's defined by positivity constraints. Okay, you should have masses that are positive, and when it's zero, there is no mass. But also you should have the conservation of mass equation, which means that all the mass of the first point get distributed to the other blue points. Okay, and in terms of equation, it means the sum of all the elements on each row should match exactly the value of A. In matrix vector notation, it means that capital P times the vector 1 should be equal to A. And of course, you have the same conservation of mass in the other direction. So capital P transpose multiplied by 1 should be equal to B. So the great idea of Kantorovich is you describe movement of mass using a gigantic polytope, the polytope of all possible coupling. And in particular, it's a convex set. Okay, so Kantorovich pretty much started the modern revolution of convex optimization. And then optimal transport is simple. It's just you minimize the sum of all the costs you have to pay when you transfer a unit amount of mass times the mass that you actually transfer. And in most cases, you would declare that this cost is some power P, where P is usually larger than 1, time the distance times the amount of mass Pij that you transfer, which means that the function that you're trying to minimize is just a linear function. So it's actually the birth of linear programming. And this revolution comes all together with another revolution, which was led by George Dantzig, which introduced the simplex algorithm, which is the first tractable algorithm to solve this type of equation. And actually, you can show that the simplex algorithm on this specific linear program has roughly a cubic complexity, which means you can pretty much solve it on a computer if the number of points is of the order of a few thousand, typically. All right, so it's a well-established theory that was introduced mostly at the start for economic application. And nowadays we see more and more people using it everywhere, in particular in data science, image processing, and machine learning. All right. Another concept that I think is very important from this is not only give you access to a notion of transport, which is very nice if you want to plan urban traffic, for instance, but also the cost of this optimization problem is very important. Okay, and I already said this before, but everything that I say works with points, but it also works with arbitrary densities. The only things you have to do is replace sum by integrals. Okay, so I won't go into the details, but it's pretty straightforward, just replacing every sum you see by an integral. Okay, what I've said is what is important is also the cost of this optimization problem. So you solve the optimization, you record the optimal coupling. In discrete, it's capital P. In continuous, it would be a measure pi. And if you take the power 1 over P of this cost, it's defined what is often called the Wasserstein distance. Okay, so Wasserstein doesn't do a lot of things in optimal transport. It's pretty much unrelated to this, but it's a usual name, so I will stick to this. Which means in particular, this W cost satisfies the triangular inequalities, because it's a distance, and it's 0 if and only if the two measures are equal. So maybe you would argue, okay, why should actually I care about this? I know tons of other distance. Why should I prefer using optimal transport? Okay. And the key and very important aspect is that optimal transport cost, so Wasserstein cost, is a very geometrical distance. By this, I mean that the topology associated to this, so the notion of how close are two distributions, is what is called the weak topology, or the topology of the convergence in law if you are a probabilist. Okay, so I won't go into the detail of what it means, but basically convergence in law, if you are in a compact space, it basically means that if you integrate your measure against any function, so if you take the expectation in probability, it should converge. Okay, so it's kind of a local notion of convergence, a geometric notion of convergence. But I think the best way to see what's happened, why it's really geometric, is simply to look at 2 Dirac. So 2 Dirac mass that will be more or less close together. And I want to contrast this by comparing to probably the simplest distance ever, the simplest norm, which is just the L1 norm, which often called the total variation norm. It's just you take the difference of the 2 measures and you take the L1 norm. So it's very, very simple. It's linear time to compute, so it's very much cheaper. Okay, so what is the L1 norm between 2 Dirac masses? If the Dirac masses don't coincide, if there are 2 locations, you take the difference, you take the absolute value, and then you sum. So the total variation norm between 2 Dirac is always 2. Meaning, even if they converge together geometrically, they don't converge for the total variation norm. On sharp contrast, if you do optimal transport of 2 Dirac, well, there is a single way to transport 2 Dirac together. So since you take power p and then power 1 over p, the Wasserstein distance between 2 Dirac is the distance itself, which will converge to 0 exactly at the good rate, which is just the rate of the distance itself. So the Wasserstein distance is the correct notion, I would say the canonical notion that conveys this idea of I have a distance between points and I want this distance to lift to distance between group of points. And actually you can show it's pretty much the only notion of distance that satisfies this exact equality equation. So it's really the canonical way to embed points into a set of distribution. So it's great. It's really what most people would like to do if they do shape matching typically, and also what people would like if they do some kind of geometrical machine learning, like model fitting, for instance, in machine learning. So it's kind of the holy grail, I would say, but as you might guess, it's not the end of the story because it's very hard to compute. And also in high dimension, it comes with a lot of problems. Okay, so the question now I want to address is what do you do in practice? So I won't go into all the details because I don't have much time, but I just want to do some name dropping about algorithms that are already existing that you can download and use very easily. The first one is just the simplex algorithm. It's great, it's simple, and it works up to, I would say, 1 or 2K points like a charm. So if you're in a small size setup, you just go for it. It's very simple. If you have just uniform distribution, so just point clouds with equal masses, then you have slightly better algorithm. And the most famous one is the Hungarian algorithm, which you can just Google it and you find the definition on Wikipedia. And I guess it's a good sign if it's there is a Wikipedia page. It's really that it's an important algorithm, and really it's like a gem of combinatorial optimization, and it works great. And related to this, you also have the auction algorithm of Bert Sekas, which is of a similar flavor. There is one case that is trivial, where you don't need to attend to my talk, is the 1D case. If you just have points in 1D, the optimal transport is simple. You just sort the points from the left to the right, and you assign the first point, blue point, to the first red point, etc. Optimal transport in 1D is always monotonic. So it's n log n complexity, so it's trivial. Of course, as soon as you go to 2D, everything breaks. And even in 2D, there is a lot of things that we still don't understand on optimal transport. It's a fairly non-trivial aspect. And you get recent field medalists of Alessio Figali, for instance, to understanding optimal transport even in low dimension. Right? But in 1D, it's fairly easy. There is another case where there is a fast algorithm, I would say, is the case where the cost is the Euclidean distance to the power p equal 1, which is often called W1. It was the problem introduced by Monge 2 centuries ago. In this case, by some nice duality arguments, you can show that actually it's a norm. It's not only a distance, it's a norm. And you can simply maximize over a vector field. So it's much lower dimensional in terms of computation. You don't need to store these huge couplings. So in this case, the algorithms are much faster. So if you're in W1, usually you can deal with better algorithm, and once again, you should go for it. There is another cost which benefits from a very strong geometry, is the cost p equal 2, which is the most famous case, I would say, which is linked to partial differential equation because it's linked to the Monge-Ampère equation. So you can solve a PDE to solve this equation. And another thing that you can do is actually compute the evolution in time of the density. You can view optimal transport as a dynamical problem that will progressively advect the mass. And this was cracked by Jean-David Benamou and Yann Brenier. And actually, the first animation you see is the geodesic between Yann and Jean-David. So here it's a bit dumb because I've just treated the black pixel as being a lot of mass. So it's totally meaningless. It's just for fun. And you can see the hair of Jean-David getting spread all over the place into the body of Jan. So it's just to mean that optimal transport is not intended to do this type of animation. It's just for fun, and this is totally totally arbitrary to treat mass as pixels gray value. All right, and last case that has drawn a lot of attention recently is the semi-discrete case, where you want to map points toward the continuous density. In this case, it's pretty straightforward. What you would have, is that the continuous density would get split into cells, disjoint cells, and each cell would be mapped to a single Dirac. Okay, so you can do the math and show that it's true. And in the case of the square Euclidean costs, you can actually show that the cells are polygonal. They are Voronoi cells in some sense. So you can benefit from fast, almost linear time algorithm to compute the Voronoi cell in 2D and 3D. But unfortunately, as you might guess, if you go to higher dimension, this type of methods, so PDE methods and semi-discrete Laguerre cells method, Voronoi cells, they start to be complicated because Voronoi cells in high dimension, they are very costly to compute. All right, so what I want to address today is rather another question, or slightly related question, is that in most cases, you don't really care about having very precise estimation of the optimal transport distance. In machine learning, we are not trying to solve some kind of physical problem. We just want some rough estimation of whether the model is good or not. So we'll be perfectly fine with having like maybe 1 or 2 digits of accuracy. And we'd like to use this fact that we don't really care about high accuracy to a very fast solver. So I would say the goal of the talk today is try to go for very inaccurate solver that could be very fast, that should be very fast, and that could go to much higher dimension. Not only in terms of number of computation, but also in terms of stability when you go to high dimension, to try to beat the curse of dimensionality. It's really the goal, I would say, of machine learning optimal transport. All right, so the main idea that we'll introduce for this is pretty simple. It's very old, actually. It can be traced back all the way to Schrödinger that used this idea to model gas. So actually before Kantorovich. So somehow Schrödinger solved an optimal transport problem before Kantorovich. Of course, he didn't do the connection with transportation, but it's what is called the lazy gas model. So it's a model for gas that diffuse, and you want to find the most likely trajectory between 2 positions of particles of gas. And this model has simply a classical Kantorovich optimal transport, where you add epsilon times the Shannon entropy of the coupling. So it's pretty straightforward. Epsilon is the temperature. If epsilon goes to 0, you get back optimal transport. But if epsilon increases, the molecule of gas will be more and more moving in a random way, and you will introduce diffusion. Okay? And here, just for the sake of normalization, but this plays almost no role, I've chosen to choose the entropy with respect to my inputs A and B. So this is the Shannon relative entropy, or minus the Shannon entropy, because the Shannon entropy is usually with a minus sign. So it's the relative entropy of P with respect to the product of the input A times B. And here I've tried to do 2 figures to give the insight of what this Schrödinger problem is doing. So if you have 2-point cloud with the same number of points, there is a very famous theorem of Birkhoff and von Neumann in the 50s that says that the optimal transport between these 2-point clouds is actually a bijection. It's just a permutation. So it's really like a very, very constrained problem where you try to match pairwise all the points. And when you introduce more and more diffusion epsilon, what I display with the black edge are entries Pij that are strictly larger than 10 to the minus 2. And when you increase epsilon, you get more and more connection, so more and more diffusion, and the good property is that it will become more and more stable, especially in high dimension. And below, it's the same thing, but now between 2 1D continuous densities. And as epsilon is equal to 0, so optimal transport, there is another very famous theorem of Jan Breunier that started I would say, the last revolution of optimal transport, that say that in this case also, the optimal transport is deterministic. It's just a 1D map. It's a monotone map. So the optimal transport is very sparse. Okay, you see this array is very sparse. And when you introduce epsilon, temperature, it acts like a blurring, like a Gaussian blur, which do like a denoising, if you want, of this optimal transport. So really, you should think of epsilon as playing the role of denoising or stabilizing the method. Okay, so it's kind of the intuition. But what is even better is with epsilon become larger and larger, you will have very fast algorithm. So the other interest is not only in terms of denoising, is also in terms of acceleration of the algorithm. And this algorithm is called Sinkhorn algorithm. So I'd like to spend a few minutes to derive the main idea of this algorithm, which is beautiful. In my view, it's one of the most beautiful algorithms for numerical analysis. And it's not so well known, but you can find it in a lot of situations that are not related actually to optimal transport. So what you do is you start by the optimization problem. It's strictly convex problem, so it has a single unique minimizer. I don't go into the detail, but you introduce Lagrange multiplier for the two constraints, the mass conservation constraints, and you would obtain, because it's the maximum entropy problems, that you can factorize the solution using a Gibbs kernel. So what is a Gibbs kernel? K is just exponential minus the cost divided by epsilon. So as epsilon goes to 0, you get something that is more and more like an identity matrix, so more and more singular. And if you think about the Euclidean cost, then this kernel is just a Gaussian kernel. And the theorems from Lagrange multipliers tell that P is a solution if and only if, you can factorize as a product of a diagonal matrix, okay, time capital K, time another diagonal matrix, And these two matrices are just scalars. So you multiply the rows and the column by two sets of scalar U and V that are positive. And you need to satisfy the conservation of mass. So with Lagrange multiplier, you see that instead of looking for this big P matrix, you just need to look for the two vectors of multipliers U and V. So this formulation of optimal transport, Schrödinger optimal transport, is often called scaling, matrix scaling. It's a very famous problem that is much older actually than optimal transport. There are some books on it starting in the early 20th century that propose this algorithm actually, a very simple algorithm to solve it, to solve for U and V. How do you derive this algorithm? Well, you look at the mass conservation, you multiply P by 1, and you see that it becomes a very simple equation. Multiplying P by 1 will give you this equation on the left that the set of scaling U multiply entry-wise. So when I do a dot with a circle, it means just entry-wise multiplication. So the classical multiplication in Python, if you want, is U time entry-wise KV that should be equal to A. And KV here, it's matrix vector multiplication. So you get first set of equation. And of course, for the other direction, you get the same equation, but you reverse the role of U and V. And the difficulty, of course, is you need to solve these two equations at the same time. So the difficulty of optimal transport is you need to enforce mass conservation on the first marginal and also on the other one at the same time. So what you can do is kind of a chicken and egg problem or a fixed point equation is you first solve the first equation. If you give me little v, I can compute U by simply dividing A by K times V. This will solve the first equation. But of course, then the second equation is not solved. So I do the same. I replace V by B divided by K transpose times U. So it's kind of an iterative algorithm where you progressively alternate between the two constraints. It's a fixed point problem. In general, there's no reason for it to converge. But in fact, it was proved by Sinkhorn in '64 that this algorithm converged. Actually, you can show that this algorithm is contracting. It's a contracting algorithm for a very beautiful metric. It's called the Hilbert metric. So it benefits from a very strong mathematical proof of convergence, and it shows that it converges at a linear rate. So it's a beautiful theory. And it was cracked by Sinkhorn. So it's why I would say most people call it Sinkhorn, although it was not introduced by Sinkhorn. It's much older. So this algorithm, you see, it's beautiful because it's so simple. If you have ever implemented a simplex algorithm, this is like order of magnitude simpler. The only costly operation here is matrix vector multiplication. So it's a K times V operation that is costly. It's roughly quadratic time. So the cost of Sinkhorn algorithm is roughly n squared multiplied by the number of iterations. And the number of iterations will depend on the accuracy you want. And if you do the math, you can try to do some kind of trade-off if you want, for instance, to approximate optimal transport to see how costly it will be. So it will be some kind of polynomial in epsilon, like typically epsilon to the power 2. So the cost is roughly of the order of n squared times number of iterations that you make. The other important aspect is not only it's efficient in terms of cost per iteration, also it's parallelizable, meaning that if you have to compute tons of optimal transport at the same time, living on the same set of points, then you can factorize everything by replacing matrix vector multiplication by matrix-matrix multiplication. And this is really an algorithm that streams extremely well on GPU. So I would say it's an algorithm that was designed to be implemented on GPU. And it's Marco Cuturi, a few years ago, 5 years ago that really made this point that this was an algorithm that was designed to be used in conjunction with neural networks if you implement everything on GPU. It's really, then it becomes really like orders of magnitude faster than any competitors, simply because it's so simple to parallelize. All right, so this is for the algorithm. You see it's pretty straightforward. I won't describe this because we don't have time. I would just mention that there are tons of extensions of this ID to many, many different problems that have the same type of optimal transport flavor. One such extension is unbalanced optimal transport, where we worked a lot with several students, including Lena Shizai. It was a PhD work of Lena Ik, which is the idea of how do you do optimal transport if the two inputs A and B, or alpha and beta, if they are measures, they don't have exactly the same mass. It turned out that you can have a simple modification of the Kantorovich formulation to account for this. I won't describe it into the details, but it's pretty straightforward. And you also have an extension of Synchron algorithm that is also pretty straightforward that can deal with a set of measures with different mass. Another extension that I want to mention that was introduced by Guillaume Carlier and Martial Aguet is the idea of, instead of doing optimal transport between two inputs, you would like to couple many inputs together and to compute their barycenter. And their barycenter would be a measure that minimize the sum of optimal transport distance toward the inputs. And what is great with optimal transport is actually not only the distance is a solution of a convex problem, but the distance itself, and the distance itself is actually convex, which means that the barycenter problem is a solution of a convex problem, which you can discretize, for instance, using points. And then you can use the same idea of doing Schrödinger entropic regularization. And guess what? You can also have an extension of Synchron algorithm to solve this. It's actually very, very intuitive. Since you need to couple several measures at the same time, you would actually run several Synchron in parallel. And from time to time, you just need to resynchronize them to compute the value of the barycenter. So it's pretty straightforward. All right, and you can use it to do like barycenter of shapes or barycenter of histograms of words to do clustering and so on. So it's kind of something that is pretty interesting to have. All right, so these are just a glimpse of some possible extension, and other extension that I don't discuss is gradient flows, where you try not to minimize a function that depend on the point or on a measure, and you can also do this using a Synchron algorithm. All right, so now I would like to enter more into this idea of high dimensional setup. What can you do with it if you are in high dimension? And what are the key bottlenecks of optimal transport in high dimension? All right. So first of all, I'll start by some kind of a bad news is actually if you use this entropic regularized or Schrödinger cost itself, it's going to be a disaster if you want to do density fitting or machine learning. And the reason is simple. It's because you add epsilon times the entropy, and the entropy is a positive number, a strictly positive number if the two measures are not equal, which means that unless alpha, even if alpha is equal to beta, if you try to compute optimal transport between a measure and itself, the cost will actually be strictly positive. So it's not a distance, of course. And what happens if you try to minimize the distance between alpha and beta, like a non-parametric point cloud fitting, which is a dumb problem, but it's kind of a sanity check, is that it creates a bias toward the inward. So instead of finding alpha equal beta, if you increase the value of epsilon, you would have the red optimal solution that shrinks progressively toward the barycenter. So you get a huge bias toward the inside, which means that if you use it like it to do fitting, it would be a disaster. So what we propose with ODE is actually a very simple fix that was introduced by a paper co-author with Marco a few years ago, that we use the same idea, is to simply subtract 1/2 of the diagonal terms. You simply subtract 1/2 of W, the score between alpha and itself, and 1/2 of the score between beta and itself. And of course, it will fix the problem that the cost is non-zero. So it will be 0 if alpha is equal to beta. But maybe by introducing this negative cost, it could be a disaster. It could be even worse. Maybe by trying to cure the problem, you're actually creating something even worse because it could maybe goes to -infinity or whatever. I don't know. So maybe it could be very bad. So what we did with ODE is simply we ran tons of numerical tests, and we found that it was working very great. It was always positive. And so then we decided to try to do the mathematics of this quantity, and we call this quantity a Synchron divergence. Because it's not a distance, but it acts like a divergence if you want to compare two objects, okay? And of course, it can be computed very efficiently with Synchron. And the first thing that we look at is just the asymptotic when epsilon goes to 0 or plus infinity. When epsilon goes to 0, it was already studied a lot, including with Guillaume Carlier, who did a few papers on this, and Christian Léonard, who is one of the experts of this question, show that when epsilon goes to 0, you get back optimal transport. The low temperature is classical optimal transport. But what is interesting is actually that the high temperature limits also have a very natural interpretation in terms of the Euclidean distance. Okay, and the idea is simple: is when epsilon goes to infinity, the Kullback-Leibler or the relative entropy will dominate, and the relative entropy is 0 if and only if the coupling pi is equal to the inputs alpha times beta, which is kind of a very simple coupling, very non-transportation coupling. If you introduce this into the cost and if you do the math, you would see that the limit when epsilon goes to 0 of the Synchron divergence is actually an Euclidean distance, what is called the kernel distance. In statistics, this kernel distance, they are often called maximum mean discrepancies, and they were introduced by Arthur Gretton that did a lot of theory and numerics around this idea of using kernel distance. And if you use this Schrödinger cost and you let epsilon goes to infinity, you obtain a kernel distance that can look a bit weird. It's a kernel associated to minus the distance. It looks weird because there is a minus sign, so you might worry, why should it be positive? But don't forget that here we apply this kernel to the difference between alpha and beta. So in particular, alpha minus beta is a measure with 0 mean. So it's a measure that is not positive. So, well, why should it be positive? Actually, it's a theorem that for some distance, this kernel is positive. It's a positive kernel. And it also has a name. It's often called the energy distance kernel. And a typical case where this quantity is positive is on Euclidean space. If you choose the cost to be the Euclidean distance to a power p, and you let p between 0 and 2, this is positive, and actually it's a norm. It's called the energy distance norm, if you want. But mathematicians, they would rather call it a Sobolev norm, because actually you can show that this kernel is a green kernel of the Laplacian. So it's a Sobolev space of negative index. It's a negative order Sobolev space, which is kind of a classical also way to compare probability distribution. And you can show actually that this type of kernel, they also metrize the convergence in law. Okay, it's not so trivial, but it's true. So the bottom line, if you want to skip the mathematical details, is the Synchron divergence. It's interpolating between two very different worlds. On the left, when low temperature limits, you get optimal transport distance, which are kind of a weird distance, highly non-flat distance. It's not usually a norm unless p is 1. On the opposite side of the spectrum, in the large temperature limit, you get a norm, which is a Euclidean norm, so very flat space. Okay, they have the same topology, but of course they behave very differently. So the question is what type of epsilon should you use? And I want to convey some insight on this, but it's still mostly open problem. I don't think there is a clear understanding of what is the best, I would say, geometrical norm or geometrical distance on probability distribution. So it's kind of an exciting type of question. These are like two very different type of objects, and here with Schrödinger we are kind of interpolating between these two extremes. All right, so this was for kind of the intuition. Now the question is it useful in high dimensional settings, and is optimal transport actually useful in high dimensional settings? So this is what I wanted to explain. Before telling you about this, let me also give you another theoretical result that we had recently with Jean Fédy and collaborators, is that we proved theoretically that the insights that Ogenve had that this was positive is actually true. So we show that if the Gibbs kernel, so exponential minus the cost divided by epsilon, is positive, which is the case, for instance, for the Euclidean kernel, then this Synchron divergent is positive, and it metrizes the weak convergence. So somehow it has the same exact property as the one that are shared by optimal transport and by MMD norms. So it's kind of a reassuring results. I would say it was intuitive, but it's good to see that it's actually true. So if you use it in practice, this minus terms, these debiasing terms, they have a huge impact. They really are able to fix the issue you got. For instance, you retrieve the fact that when you do density fittings, it's 0 if and only if you get exact optimal fits, so perfect fits. Okay, so it doesn't mean that in practice it works better, but at least it's reassuring, meaning that it acts as a true divergence. All right, so I've already asked the question. So what happened in high dimension? Okay, is it worth using optimal transport in high dimension? And the short answer is no. Optimal transport cannot work in high dimension. And the reason is simple, is that optimal transport, it needs an enormous amount of points to be able to be estimating distance in high dimension. Okay, and this is this theorem that conveys this idea. It's actually proved in a lot of papers. So it's kind of a folklore theorem. So in practice, so what you'd like is to estimate the distance between two measures, but in a classical scenario, you need to discretize the problem. For instance, in machine learning, you would have random samples, n samples, and you would try to approximate the true optimal transport by the empirical or the discrete optimal transport distance between the samples. And if you do the math, you would see quite easily that the error you make by this discretization is enormous. It's of the order of 1 over n to the power 1 over d, which is basically the error you make if you quantize point in high dimension. And optimal transport has to pay the price of quantization in high dimension, which means that it scales exponentially bad with the dimension. So even if dimension is, let's say, 6 or 7, I don't know, it's already like impossible to estimate. Like if you want to compare just two uniform distribution on a cube, for instance, of course, if you don't know anything and you don't know it was cubes, you just observe points, it's impossible to guess the distance. It would be too large. In sharp contrast, if you do the same with Euclidean distances like kernel norm, it's much better because basically you just need to discretize integrals. And this is like Monte Carlo integration if you want. And then the cost, the distance itself, would decay with a rate that is independent of the dimension, which is 1 over square root of n, which is a classical rate for Monte Carlo method. So optimal transport scales exponentially bad, but MMD scales well in terms of scaling. It doesn't mean it works because capital O, big O notation means there is a constant, and the constant can be enormous in high dimension, but at least in terms of decay, the asymptotic is much better with MMD. So optimal transport basically suffers the curse of dimensionality. So you need to do something. If you want to do optimal transport in high dimension, it will not work unless you leverage some kind of knowledge or something that the density is not arbitrary. Maybe you know it was uniform on the cube, maybe I don't know, but you need to leverage something. And a way to leverage this kind of thing is to replace optimal transport distance by this entropic regularization. And it's what we're working on now with my teams. And the first result we had is quite intuitive, is that the synchrone divergence has a rate which interpolates between maximum limit discrepancies and optimal transport. Meaning that as soon as you do a little bit of diffusion, the convergence rate becomes independent of the dimension, is 1 over square root of n. But of course, there is no free lunch. The constant will explode with epsilon. The constant is pretty much epsilon to the power minus d, which means that if you let epsilon be too small, the constant will be very large. So this is like a no free lunch theorem, telling you that if you want to use it to actually approximate optimal transport, you would need to use a small epsilon. So you would retrieve a rate that depends on the dimension very badly. So the goal of this theorem is not to tell you that this is a way to cure optimal transport. It's just that this is an alternative that is somehow using some idea of optimal transport, using some geometry, which you can safely estimate in high dimension if you don't use epsilon that is too small. So arguably, it's not a very strong theorem. It's just, once again, reassuring that these are quantities that you can estimate in high dimension. But it's kind of stimulating to use it for maybe more high dimensional setup that you would not have hoped to do with classical optimal transport. And I want to conclude my talk with some typical illustration. And as a disclaimer, there would be no mathematics. So it's just like fun graphics to connect this with things that maybe people in the audience are actually working on, which is generative networks. So I'm not an expert in generative networks, and I don't want to convey the idea that optimal transport is a solution to the generative network problem. It's just a way to model the problem, and you can use software from optimal transport for it. The problem is the same as before, it's just density fitting. So optimal transport generative model is simply you try to do density fittings, and the interesting aspect, which you can do with classical method like Kullback-Leibler method, but the key aspect, key insight of generative model, which I think is a great idea, is you will parameterize your model in a generative way. Meaning you would not give the equation of the density alpha theta, because in high dimension it's just too complicated, but you will actually describe an algorithm that generates the data. And how do you generate random data in high dimension? Well, it's pretty obvious. What you do, you draw some points in low dimension, let's say according to a Gaussian or to a uniform distribution on a square here. and then you map it to high dimension using a deep neural network. So the density is kind of implicitly defined by the mapping. Okay, so it's kind of clever, and it's really a great way to generate data if you have a mapping that is complicated enough. And density fittings in this framework of generative model just try to look for the optimal map G theta, so for the optimal neural network, for instance, to describe some kind of a surface, so a density in high dimension that is as close as possible from the input, from the exemplar. And of course, it's a very hard problem because you are in a very high dimensional output space, and usually the data, the intrinsic dimensionality of your model is very low because you generate data from a low dimensional distribution. So this is why optimal transport and more generally convergence in law or geometric methods are needed, because you really need an object that is very robust. You need a way to compare distribution in a very robust way. So I think it's why it makes sense to formulate this problem using MMD or optimal transport. Okay, at least it's the main motivation. And I don't think there is any mathematics to support this claim, but it's kind of the intuition that it's a good idea to go in this direction. Okay, so I don't have time and I won't do this to describe deep networks, but just as a disclaimer is here, you use generative networks, which kind of the opposite of discriminative networks, where you start by a very low dimensional vector or descriptor in latent space, and you progressively do some kind of a deconvolution to obtain a very high dimension and beautiful image, all right? If you use it for small images like MNIST dataset, it works great. Of course, you don't really need deep networks, just 2 layers is enough. And I think it's pretty well understood that on simple datasets, this type of network, discriminative or generative, they works like a charm. Okay, now the question is, how do you solve this problem in practice? It's almost impossible to solve exactly or even approximately. Because you need to minimize a very complex function over like an object which is a continuous distribution. So no way you can solve it. So what people do in practice is they just use gradient descent with a stochastic optimization. So some kind of stochastic gradient descent. But of course here it's totally outside of the theory. So you don't really know what's happened. Your gradient might be biased, so you are in very high dimension. So it's pretty unclear. Well, people try it and do some code for it to see what happens. Okay, here it's pretty straightforward. You don't want to compute these gradients, the gradient of the function you want to minimize by hand. So what you would do is you would simply code your algorithm using your favorite deep learning framework and use some kind of automatic differentiation method for it. Okay, and I think it's pretty nice because you can really think of SYNCORN as being some kind of extra layer that you put on top of your deep net. So you see on the left, you get the generative networks that create random images or random vectors by simply running deep networks. Then you form the cost matrix by comparing the 2 point cloud that you've described, the random point clouds, the fake point cloud if you want, and the true data sets. And then you run SYNCORN, which is alternating between a linear operator, the Gibbs kernel, and a nonlinear operator, which is just the inversion, 1 over x, kind of a pointwise nonlinearity. All right, I don't need to go through teaching you automatic differentiation. I guess most of you are even more expert than myself. I think it's a great idea. It suffers from memory issues. So if you have a lot of iteration of your algorithm, you need to use some clever trick to run it. But besides this memory issue, it gives you an optimal way to compute derivative. Okay, and I think we should credit this guy who is not the first one that introduced this idea, but really makes the point that it was efficient in his master thesis. So it's really like one of the key concepts from machine learning, which allows you to compute gradient in very high dimension very efficiently. All right, but it's just like one slide to remind you what would be the way to do this. So some examples. So on simple data sets, you can just use the Euclidean distance as the optimal transport distance on the MNIST data set, for instance. And it works very, very well. I mean, any method would work well on this data set, so it's not super convincing. Now the question is, what do you do in high dimensional problems like image processing, image generation? And if you use the Euclidean distance, it's a disaster. So I think one of the key inventions of the last few years is this idea introduced by Ian Goodfellow and co-workers of adversarial networks. So what you do is you train a second networks to basically discriminate the data, to discriminate the fake from the true data set, which you can think in terms of optimal transports as a way to learn the metric. So it's kind of a metric learning problem. So you see here, we are really in something that there is no mathematics to really analyze what's happening, but it's very exciting. So this is a video from NVIDIA. So it's not our own data sets. So we just did some toy problems on small 64 times 64 images. But here you can really reach high dimensional resolution using this type of method. Okay, and here it's not using particularly optimal transport. Actually, you can use other types of metrics to compare distribution. And it's not clear which one is the best. I mean, everyone is using its favorite scores to measure it, but it's pretty not so well understood. All right, so let's conclude the talk with just some key take-home message. I think one important point is that optimal transport has a long history. So I didn't cite a lot of people, but you can go all the way, of course, to Kantorovich, Danzig, then Jan Brenier, of course, that did the revolution in PDE, Cedric Villani, and Figali that got the field medals, and so on. So there is a deep understanding of the property of this type of problem, but not so much of what happened in high dimension. So everything here was mostly either theoretical or restricted to low dimensional setup. I think there is still a front of research to lead into what happened in high dimension to these optimal transport problems, what are the properties that we'd like to use, and which one we need to cure. There is, of course, this question of generative models. I've already said this. And another question that I'm working on is what happens if you don't know your cost, which is a bit related to the first aspect. What happens if you have two data sets that live in abstract space? How can you connect them together? A way to do this was introduced by Karl Theodor Sturm and Facundo Memoli, who introduced the idea of Gromov-Wasserstein matrix, which is an extension. But unfortunately, it needs to solve a quadratic problem, which is NP-hard. So there's still a lot of rooms toward trying to address more complex problems. And well, I will stop here. And if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.